Our government don't believe in Santa or the power of Christmas, but we do, and we will overcome the deniers and establish a rule over Finland that will finally support Santa on his mission to bring presents all over the world. It might seem crazy right now, but people are growing tired of the government. We could use this to our advantage. And then, out of nowhere, an economic crash occurred in Germany, quickly spreading throughout Europe. Since our economy is heavily tied to the German, we also got hit by it. This has led to even more instability and dissent. And if an economic downturn wasn't enough, our grain imports from Ukraine have been reduced. And with that it began, peasants supporting the far-right non-Santa believing Laupa movement began protesting and marching in Helsinki. We can't let them take power, so we organized our own protests. But we didn't only organize protests, we created a Red Guard. And with this new guard we started clashes against the Lapua movement. The government didn't dare to intervene with the police and instead only watched our movements grow. And then, out of nowhere, the Lapua movement tried to take power in a coup by capturing all important buildings in Helsinki. The government forces were nowhere to be seen, so to not let Finland fall even further away from Santa, we intervened and began fighting them. After a fierce battle, we came out on top and managed to push them out of Helsinki. But instead of giving everything back to the government, we captured their politicians and took control of the country. Finland is free and we can finally bring Christmas to it. Santa will be proud. To get rid of the old non-Santa believers, we let them either convert to our side or get purged. But with all these new followers, we will have to produce a ton of presents to give them at Christmas. And we can't let Santa do all the work. So it's time to fix our old economy and reform it to provide help to Santa's workshop. To not rely too much on foreign trade, we ramped up our domestic factory construction. And the second way to help our economy and Santa Claus is to urbanize our population. The closer people live to each other, the less Santa will have to travel. After that, we supported the successful Finnish company of Alstrom, granting us even more domestic production. If you remember, we are very reliant on grain imports. We have to ramp up our domestic production on that too. So we began to work with the landowners, sadly giving away some of our consumer goods. But this allowed us to later enact land reforms to utilize our lands to its greatest extent. Meanwhile, our biggest neighbor, Russia, had a change in leadership and the national populist and non-Santa believer Boris Savinkov took power. This will definitely be a problem in the future. So it's time to hurry up with the economic reforms. We expanded our railway systems and remade our trains to Christmas trains. And then, as a last thing, we diverted funds to the University of Helsinki to begin research on the power of Christmas. With all of our reforms and changes, we can finally say we have financial strength. Everyone in Finland will get a present on Christmas. With that over, we can strengthen our position in power, but also seek allies outside of our borders. You might not believe it, but there are other nations passionate about Christmas and Santa. Our Nordic brothers in Norway have managed to overthrow their non-Santa believing king. They have already joined the Third Christmas International. And in Georgia, a prominent Christmas believer, Josef Yugashvili, is trying to unite the Caucasus region. We will send him volunteers to help him win his war and train our soldiers at the same time. Back at home, we denounced the non-Santa believing monarchists of the world and consolidated our power through expansion of bureaucracy. Then we disbanded the old religious institutions, changing them to our own Christmas-believing institutions. All this allowed us to write a new Finnish constitution. We can now seize assets from the rich to help out Santa in producing his presents. I'm sure they won't mind. We have finally done it. We have created a new Finland. So it's time to re-examine the Finnish armed forces to ensure we're up to the task of defending our nation. Since we don't have unlimited amount of manpower, we will focus on expanding our firepower instead of army size. But then, before we could do much, the Russians striked, demanding that we give them Karelia. We will never give it to them. This will definitely put us in a war with them. But before they attack us and the news get out to the world, we'll ask to join the Third Christmas International. To our surprise, they accepted. We are now a part of the faction to fight for Santa. We will also join the research corporation, boosting ours and theirs research. But even though we joined the Third Christmas International, the Russians declared war. We will immediately turn our economy into a war economy and also start service by requirement. Then we called our new allies into the war. Soon they joined to help us. The Russian army is huge but outdated. They are already in a war against a minor nation that they haven't been able to win yet. But since our front with the Russians is so big, we'll have to retreat away from northern Finland. Hopefully, Norway will be able to handle them. As the war started, not much happened, only a few skirmishes on our most southern border. It seems like the Russians never thought we would actually go to war. Since there were almost no Russians in northern Finland, we redirected some of our defense to the south. Then our forces we sent to Georgia arrived home. We also sent these veterans to the south. And to make our defense even better, our allies began arriving both in the north and in the south. So we began attacking the Russians. If we break through, we might be able to capture their exposed capital of Petrograd. But the battle was a stalemate. Sometimes we were winning and sometimes they. But then they made a grave mistake and began attacking us from their flanks. Seems like a great idea, but we got help from a British militia that held our flanks. This allowed us to change where we attacked and instead attack the exhausted Russians that had tried the offensive. We have now arrived to the river of Neva. The Russians immediately tried to counterattack us. We also tried but failed. Luckily, we are holding the Russians off. In the meantime, we began supporting a state-owned arms manufacturer, granting us even more domestic manufacturing. We also started training 4 more divisions with the new men we had recruited. The Russians have just now started to put pressure in the north, so we need even more divisions. But we still lack manpower, so we reorganized our mobilization structure, providing around 5% more manpower. We also began reinforcing the Mannerheim line. Now, even though the Russians are getting stronger, they might be biting off more than they can chew. The Confederation of Peoples of the Caucasus have begun pushing them back, and our allies landed a naval invasion in Pechenga. Our 4 divisions have been deployed even though they aren't fully trained, and with them we will try to push the Russians completely out of their territory north of the Neva River. And that's what we did. The Russians didn't think the offensive would come and we quickly punched them back. We now have a perfect position to defend. But the Russians kept attacking and attacking over the river and we killed several thousands of their men. So we saw the opportunity to cross the Neva River, but somehow the Russians held us back. So it's time to take a defensive stance. Now it's just a waiting game. Several months later we have killed around 250,000 Russians. Those are rookie numbers, it's time to step up our game. So we encircled the small most western part of the Russian invasion. It was largely successful, so we will try a second bigger encirclement. We easily broke through the weak Russian defenses, but once we continued up north, we realized that this offensive was far too ambitious. So we retreated back without any consequences. We will once again try a smaller encirclement. So we began the offensive and everything seemed to go fine. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and see you in the next video.